I want to present an idea to you in 3 acts. So the first act has absolutely nothing to do with education. The second act has everything to do with education, and the third act will be determined by your questions. Sound good? So first question for you, though, are there some movie fans in the house? Do we have some movie lovers? I'm a movie lover. As Tracy said, sometimes I even get to make movies. I'm also the parent of 2 small children, which means I never get to see movies anymore, or actually more specifically, the movies I get to see are kid movies. But I am paying attention to the movies that you all are watching because I feel like almost more than any other aspect of our culture, the movies that we are choosing to make and see is like the tip into the collective unconscious and the zeitgeist. So what is it that we are choosing to dream about together in a dark theater? And I don't know if you've noticed this, but increasingly it seems like the movie industry is obsessed with the growing need to transcend the biological limits of body and brain. And there's a lot of movies that I could point to as an example of this, but this one is probably the best example. Her. How many people have seen this movie? Okay, if you haven't, have to go see this. First of all, it's a great film. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. And in many respects, it captures some aspects of what can be the lonely dystopia of modern life. The fact that increasingly we're in close proximity to each other and yet more separated and alone. So the movie is set in the not too distant future. They don't specify when. But the lead character, Joaquin Phoenix, not for nothing, his job is to write letters on other people's behalf. So it's like, if I want to send a beautiful love letter to my wife, but I'm too busy to do so, I hire his company and they write it for me, and she doesn't know. And so the character himself is very lonely. We know he was in a relationship and it's gone wrong. But of course, as is always the case in a movie, things change and he falls in love. And this is the scene in the movie, it's like the Titanic moment, right? He's at the front of the ship, he's got the wind in his hair, he's with his love who you can't see. Well, actually, you can, because that's his love. This is a love story about a man who falls in love with his operating system. And I know this is hard to believe because those of us that are thinking of Siri, how could you possibly fall in love with Siri? But this is the world's first artificially intelligent operating system. And so he has the phone just high enough so that the camera can allow his love, her, to see everything that he sees. And there's something very powerful and very disturbing about that. But again, it's not just her. I could point to lots of other examples. Here's another recent one, Ex Machina. Anybody see this movie, which is about like a young tech billionaire who recruits an employee to his remote compound. The employee thinks he's just like won a contest, but in fact, he's been recruited for a week-long Turing test, which is the idea named after Dr. Turing back in 1940s, who came up with this idea that was, if you put a person in a room and there's a human and an artificially intelligent being, and over time the human can't tell the difference, that AI passes the Turing test. But it's not just movies. So, like, anybody see this ad where John Malkovich is talking to his current operating system, Siri, and she tells him a joke, and he laughs like a little too heartily? You know, like I was a little embarrassed for John Malkovich when I saw this commercial. Like, dude, do you really need the money that badly? Because this, I thought you were a kind of an actor of some repute. But then this one. So, anybody see this commercial where Bob Dylan is having a conversation with IBM's supercomputer Watson, and they're talking about writing a song together. And so here's the thing, right? If Bob Dylan is talking about writing a song with a supercomputer, you know the line that's coming, right? What does that tell us? The times, they are a-changin'. And to the point where I was talking about this with my brother-in-law, and then he told me about something that I hadn't heard about before, and it was one of those moments like, as soon as you learn something new, you can never unlearn it, and it forever shapes the way you see the world. So he told me about something called the technological singularity. So I'm just curious, show of hands, how many people are familiar with the technological singularity? Okay, about half. For those of you that aren't, get ready, okay? Because it's kind of an intense notion. And basically, the idea is that throughout the course of human history, not even throughout the course of human history, throughout the course of life on Earth, meaning from like the primordial soup through the Precambrian and horseshoe crabs and jellyfish and the Stone Age and the Renaissance and the 60s, all of that, even with the leaps that we've had through things like the printing press and the Industrial Revolution, all of that has actually been a relatively flat curve when it comes to human capacity for knowledge. And so it makes sense that we would continue to feel that we're just somewhere along that flat line. But there is a J-curve moment coming. In fact, the best example, you know how like once the world population reached 1 billion people, it stayed at 1 billion forever until 300 years ago. And then, because of the Industrial Revolution, straight up. So now we have 6 billion, we'll have 8 billion in the next couple of decades. We are standing on the precipice of a similar J-curve when it comes to human knowledge, and that is the technological singularity, which is the idea that once artificially intelligent life pulls even with and then merges with, rapidly surpasses natural intelligence, all bets are off. And here's the crazy thing. So there are a number of different predictions about the technological singularity, but about when it will happen. But if you aggregate them, it's roughly 2040. So think about that. So that means that, you know, inshallah, everyone in this room will have a chance to experience what happens on the other side of the moment when the carbon-based beings and the silicon-based beings get together and throw a party. Now, I realize that has nothing to do with education, but it has everything. This is my son, Leo. And if I think about the world that Leo will be entering and primarily navigating throughout the course of his life, you go back to her, right? So her, it's set in the not too distant future. It's the dawn of the first artificially intelligent being. That's my son. My son is the Joaquin Phoenix character in her. Every kindergartner in the world is the Joaquin Phoenix character in her. Meaning, people that are alive today will not just experience this, but experience the bulk of their adult lives in a world that is completely different. And yet, when it comes to education, we're still debating things like charter schools and the Common Core. But think about it, right? The fundamental unit of currency in education has always been knowledge. So we are due for some very big changes, which begs then a core question of, well, what's next? What does the future schools need to be designed to do? Well, so first I want to just be clearer on what they've been designed to do, right? So also, I think it's safe to say, everybody in this room, I know we're an international group, I know we have a range of ages, and yet it's safe to say that everyone's educational experience in this room has been pretty much the same, because it's been pretty much the same for the last 100 years. The primary two design principles for education as we have known it up to this point are represented in this picture. They are the tabula rasa, the student as the empty vessel, the blank slate, whose head must be literally filled with fixed concepts of knowledge that the adult has and that they don't. And the second is the assembly line, that the role of education is literally taking the language of the industrial era to batch and queue unprecedented numbers of young people through a fixed system of education and into an economy that was largely fixed and known. Does that sound like today to you? So the experience, if we're going to get really specific about it, it's this, right? I mean, like this is, I love this picture because first of all, the impossibility, first of all, how did he write all the way on the top? Like, how did he get up there, let alone what he got up there? But so the assumption is very clear, right? That this professor is the holder of all that knowledge, and the only way that we can possibly acquire it is to sit in that lecture hall and have him transfer it directly to us. But this is already changing, right? I mean, you'll still, if you go to most colleges, you're still going to find lecture halls and you're still going to have 500 people. But if you turn the camera around, this now looks like this. So we have some work to do. We have to think a little more intentionally about what it means to prepare young people for their future as opposed to our past. And in order to do that, we have to, it's a challenge and an opportunity, right? So these are now, that's Leo and then my youngest son, Izzy, okay? And if we use them as examples of where we've been and where we're going, the way that we've always thought about human potential and how we organize it and how we move people through is pretty much represented by this, right? There's the bell curve. I mean, when I was a teacher, I was told, like, you can't give everybody A's or F's. Give a couple A's, couple F's, mostly B's and C's. That's just the logic, right? That's how it works. We do this in our workplaces. How do we determine who are the high achievers, who are the low achievers? Because this is the unconscious assumption about the way that human behavior and human potential works. And it's not true. I mean, think about it, right? Statistics is the mathematics of static values. Have you ever met a human being that represented a static value to you? So statistics and aggregating are useful when trying to take all of the predictions of the technological singularity and settle on an average year. It makes no sense if I try to take all of the remarkable potential that is represented in this room and to then aggregate that down to an average. Yet this is what we do. So the opportunity, really the responsibility going forward, if we are on the cusp of a J-curve as it relates to human knowledge and potential, what would it need to look like in order for every school to be designed to allow each individual to follow their own distinct J-curve of growth and potential? That's the challenge. That's the opportunity. So, core question, what must our schools be designed to do? Tracy said, I'm a partner at a global learning and design studio called Wonder. So we think about this a lot, right? What are the core design principles? How do we think about schools differently, spatially, culturally, structurally, pedagogically? And in a way, the opportunity that we have is at a larger scale to get closer to the spirit that has always guided great teachers like Mrs. Fenton, which is that the ultimate measure of success is not what children know, but who they become. The fundamental end goal of schooling is not content knowledge. It's merely the means by which we reach the fundamental end goal, which is a set of skills and dispositions that can guide young people through life. An understanding of the interrelationship between the habits of the hand, the head, and the heart that is ultimately in service of this question, which we're all here thinking about, which is ensuring that every person understands what it means to be free. And I know we're an international group, but since we are having this conversation here in the States, I have to say, as Americans, we can sometimes get confused in how we understand what it means to be free. And the reason is because we are a society that is basically, we have dual allegiance to the core values of capitalism and the core values of democracy. And let's be honest, those values don't always run in the same direction. So it is very easy for us to believe that the core principles of what it means to be free are the core principles of capitalism, which is more about consumption, right? I am free to buy whatever blue jeans I want. I am free to get a red sports car. But that's not what we're talking about in education. That's not the core value of democracy. The core value of democracy is not consumption, it's conscience. Right? Roger Williams, the great early founder, the man that was too pure for the Puritans. Think about that, right? He got kicked out of Massachusetts because he was just causing too much trouble. Eventually founded Rhode Island as a haven for the cause of conscience. Somebody who spent his whole life looking for the true church. Founder of the Baptist Church in America and then left it. Sometimes would not even say grace with his wife. He drew the circle very narrowly. But what Williams believed, and what I believe you all can join me in believing, is that each human being is endowed by their Creator with soul liberty, which means, to put it another way, that we all have the right to be wrong. And so the purpose of understanding conscience is to put people in a position where they're able to reflect on, of all the things that I can say and do and commit myself to in the world, what must I say? What must I do? What must I commit myself to in the world? That's a very different notion of education than the one that all of us have experienced. And Hollywood is helpful for this too, right? Like Hollywood has offered a little bit of a vision of what this might look like. Anybody know what movie this is? Wally. Who saw Wally? Yes. Okay, good, right? Amazing film. Just because it's animated doesn't mean it's for kids. And in a way, what Wally is suggesting is what happens if you spin out over many centuries the consequences of believing that consumption is what we owe primary fidelity to and not conscience. So the people of the future are basically, they have video screens this close to their head, and all they're doing is making consumer choices all day long. They literally never get out of their lazy boy chairs. So we have work to do, but I believe we have a different design principle that we can follow.
I see an animal.
And this is it.
Where?
I see three. I can see something flying low. I reckon it's like a coot or something. And two swans. Look up!
Oh, wow.
Yes, they're over there. Oh, and look at those amazing shapes.
Beautiful, right? When I saw that, I thought, that's it. The organizing principle for the future of learning, it's not the assembly line. It's not continuing to view people as plots along a bell curve. It's not spatial designs that are better suited for the tightly orchestrated movement of troops in wartime than they are for unique individuals. The design principle for the future is a murmuration of starlings. That's what it means to be free. It's the idea of having both the space to follow one's own passion and to feel undeniably bound in that web of inescapable mutuality. It's the improvisatory choreography that reflects what we know about human beings and how they learn. And it's a civic order and a global ecosystem of people that, because of the changing nature of schooling and the changing nature of society, are put in a better position than we were to understand from the youngest age what it means to be free and what it means to follow one's conscience in the service of creating a better and more equitable society. Thank you.